Hi, this is Peter Teuscher, and I'm here with Toby Demker. Thanks for joining us for another podcast. It's a new year, and we do this podcast to have basically a conversation. We pick a topic and see where the conversation takes us, and we're really looking to help people improve, add value, and share our experience in development personally and professionally. So thanks for joining us for another one. Toby, great to see you and talk to you again here in the new year.
Yeah, great to see you in 2023.
Yeah,
New
absolutely.
beginnings.
So to start off this year, it's my turn to have a topic, and I thought I'd really like to talk about a book that's been very influential for me and millions of other people, and that's Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And so it's not a book review. It's just I'd like to just go through the steps or through the habits and really, let that be our prompt for our conversation. So what do you think of
Sure.
that?
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, for me, as well as for you, and for, I guess, anybody in the field, this has been a very influential book. And whatever you talk about in terms of self-development or coaching or leadership development, there's always a lot of references that you can do to the habits and to the book. And it's really good timing as well. I think at the start of the new year, you kind of want to revisit a few things and think about how you can utilize to be even more effective, or thinking about, I'm always talking about your daily intentions or your purpose and how you can relate to that, and perhaps refine the habits for yourself while by introducing them to your daily kind of intentions or purpose. So it's a good timing for me.
Yeah, good. And I find having read so many books, I had a coaching session with someone recently who said, "How do you remember all these books?" And it's like it just seems to come to me at the it's the network in my head. It's so funny. A situation will prompt a book that I've read, and
Mm.
this is the value of reading all these different authors. But I'm amazed still when I do workshops or have coaching where people haven't read the book, or they've heard of it but they haven't read it, or they've read it and they can't even name one of the habits. So I
Mm.
think this is a great chance to refresh people or get people acquainted. And and if you haven't read it, I mean, it's highly recommended, right? It's not just for people looking to be successful in business or so on. Like there's some really good tips for everyday life. And I
Mm.
think with all the stuff that we read and we've learned, I don't know how this is for you, but for me, I sometimes think, everybody already knows this. This is common sense.
Mm.
And then you bring it into a workshop or a coaching session, and it's like, I'd never thought of that before. And so I think for me, sometimes I underestimate the knowledge that I have to pass on, and just because we've gotten this stuff is stuff we talk about all the time. It's so commonplace, and I think it's not for everybody else, and
Mm.
that's a reminder that I give myself. So this is a bunch of common sense for me, or stuff that I'm very familiar with that I hope everyone will benefit from. So with that, should we jump into habit number 1 from Stephen Covey?
All right. Okay.
Okay, so his I mean, I don't have to tell you, you know them very well as well. But the first habit in the book is be proactive,
Mm.
and this is very much about taking responsibility for your own life.
Mm.
A lot of people they focus on problems rather than solutions, or they are reactive um, rather than going, this is where I want to get to and these are the actions I'm going to take. Or someone is acting out of fear and I'm not going to respond to them.
Mm.
So it's everything from you can see things going wrong, right? You know where some conversation will lead you because you've had them so many times before, but you
Mm.
get sucked into the same disputes, or you blame things on circumstances rather than going, trying to foresee what's the trying not to repeat the same mistakes, that kind of thing. So for me, the his whole point about being proactive is taking responsibility for yourself, not leaving things to not blaming other people in other situations or circumstances, but recognizing what do you have control over. What decisions can you make differently if you're unhappy with the current outcomes? That sort of thing. That's the way I interpret the first habit. How about you?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think I guess I think about this a lot, and I use and I've talked about this before in our conversations about being above the line, being creative rather than reactive, thinking about what the circle of influence and what focusing on the things that you can have an influence on. So for me, it's very much thinking about it in terms of that where am I now? Am I above the line or below the line? For me, that's a very helpful kind of framework to be proactive. But I think it's really important, two things to mention that, even, and as you say, this is a great reminder. I mean, even if you know this, it doesn't mean that you are proactive all the time. This is something that we have to bring into our conscience, that we have to think about, and have to practice a lot. Because it's sometimes it's hard work to take the proactive stance. It might feel better to be feeling a little bit reactive or or depending on the situation, right? But just okay, so making a conscious choice. Okay, so where do I want to be right now? And I think, if I remember correctly, Stephen Covey talked a lot about that in his book, in the words that the way that you use your language. Like, it's very common that I have to do this or I have to do that. And that's not necessarily true, but I choose to do this, or I don't choose to do this. And just that little difference makes a really big difference for me. And it's easy to notice in others. It's harder to notice in yourself.
Big time. It's so funny because, I've talked about it many times, but I have the three ways that you can talk about your intentions or what you're planning on doing. You can talk about I can, I want to, and I will, right? So do I have the ability? Do I have the desire? And do I have the commitment? Those are kind of the things. And it's funny because then I'm telling these to even my friends and so on, and then when I say I have to, do you have to? So it's great that I have people that also hold me to account. But it's, these are habits that are so ingrained, and we hear it all the time in our language. In Germany, I find it especially pronounced when they, I must is something that's so so prevalent in the language, and it's, when you hear it all the time, it's hard to stick to that, that habit, but it's a good one.
Yeah, and I think I mean, just in terms of as I said, bringing it into your pattern of thinking and also practicing yourself. I think that's a really good way to start. Okay, so just thinking about how am I speaking about things, that I want to do this now, or I will do this now, or I choose to do this now.
Well, I find myself even correcting myself in the, I've said I should or I have to, and then I find I correct myself. But
isn't that a great notion when you notice that, oh, I'm actually correcting myself? That's talking about finding a spot where, oh, I'm improving or I'm developing.
Yeah, absolutely. But it just reminds me that we're not perfect. It's somebody said to me recently, because I was in the stress of the having a move. My girlfriend and her daughter moved in, and someone said, for a coach, I would have expected you to be a little bit more positive, because we're all still human. We still have our moments when we get get frustrated, get in a mood, and we can't be positive all the time. And I don't think it's a fair expectation to think that you need to be positive all the time, but I think it's a good reminder. I think looking for people to reflect back to us those things, and then I think that's why the first one is a really important one in terms of the entire set of 7 habits, because it's taking responsibility for your life and your actions, and recognizing that you have you have the most power to change and guide your life, and everything else is out of your control, right? So it doesn't matter. So yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get us off track.
No, it's not. And I think it's, for me, it's also kind of energy building to think about what are the things that I can influence. For me, it builds energy for all the other habits, or for all the other steps that are to come. To taking that stance. So, okay, I can do something about this. This is, if I want things to happen, then the power is within me. And for me, that's just a really energy building or energy giving kind of an idea. So
I agree. Yeah, totally. And I think that this notion that, well, I'm only one person, what can I do, right? And to that, I always tell people, well, you're part of the most powerful group in the world. You're a consumer.
Yeah.
the amount of money and research and marketing that goes into influencing the choices and opinions and wants of consumers. It's the biggest in a market economy. It's the most important thing, right? So even when it comes to politics and voting and just trying to influence people. So it's not to be underestimated, the power you have as an individual through the choices that you make, and so being proactive and recognizing your power and recognizing your responsibility as well. That's super important.
Yeah. I mean, if you're only talk about your own life or your own situation, I mean, you are definitely the biggest stakeholder, right? So you can totally control where do you want to be, developing yourself and your situation for your family, etc. So I think it's a very powerful place to begin.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, should we look at the second habit?
All right. Yeah.
So habit number 2 from Stephen Covey is begin with the end in mind. So for me, this is very much about knowing where you want to get to. I'm a big fan of visualization. I've talked about rituals we do sort of end of the calendar year or start of the new year. And I like to do vision boards. I like to do all these kind of things because it really gets your attention on what you want, which leads into the next one. But really having some direction for yourself. I like to talk to people about, why this is so important. I give the analogy of you wouldn't get on a sailboat and just sail off into the blue. Most people wouldn't. It's important to chart your course and so on. So you have a destination where you want to get to. And that doesn't mean that along the way you decide, let's change course, or the weather's bad, so we need to navigate differently, or on the way you realize you want to have a different destination. But to give you some direction, right? It's knowing where you want to get to, and then making sure, because with the choices that I have in life, especially the bigger life choices, I'm often asking myself, does this get me closer to where I want to be or farther from it, right? And this is what I encourage in the people that I coach as well, because if we make these reactive choices, habit number 1, and then and part of that is because we don't know where we even want to get to. We don't know what we want. And so when you have a clear vision of where you're trying to get to with the end in mind, I think that really helps your day-to-day choices and, the actions that you're taking and the habits that you're living, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously I agree. I think for me, it's also about having the ability to sort of raise your head once in a while and remind yourself, okay, so what is the purpose of this? Where are we going? Asking yourself those kind of questions. Covey talked about, okay, beginning with the end in mind. So you already have a very clear idea. I find more and more especially in organizations, it's more and more difficult to have a really clear vision of what the end result looks like, because very likely, in some cases, very likely that the end result will have changed when you kind of get there, right? Because things are changing so fast. So for me, of course, it's really important to have a purpose or a vision or an objective. Okay, so what are we working towards, and have a really clear kind of agenda or image of what that looks like. But then also to constantly remind ourselves, okay, so where are we going? Why are we doing this? To remind ourselves, because it's so easy that we get stuck in the details all of the time. So when you get stuck in something, just sort of get that holistic view. Okay, how does this fit together? Where are we going? Why are we doing this? And we talked about the purpose of, or starting with why, and the purpose. I think that was the first episode we even
Yeah.
had,
Yeah,
actually, like
absolutely.
starting with purpose. So for me, it's really really strong, important habit. Um, but maybe I'm sort of in my view, maybe I'm reviewing it a little bit, and to do it not only to begin with the end in mind, but I'll very often kind of review it and ask questions. Okay, well, so why are we doing this? What does this has to do with the end result that we want to achieve? Just to clarify for things. And I find myself very often doing that in meetings. It's just so how does this relate to where we want to go? Because it's so often that we get off track, or we start talking about something that actually doesn't have to do with the core issue.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, I think you can build really powerful kind of habits and questions around this as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a habit that you can use short term or long term, right? You can go into a meeting, or you can go into a conversation. You can go into negotiation, like especially negotiation, like understanding where you want to try and get to is
Mm,
super important.
mm,
Um, but it can be simply a conflict resolution, right? You're
mm,
going into conversation trying to resolve a conflict. You are going into a meeting with some kind of an objective,
mm,
or it can be, I'm going to, like, people will say, it's the new year, I got to join a gym. Well, why are you doing, like you said,
mm,
know your why. Where would you like to get to? What are you trying to achieve? And getting it really clear in your mind. I think the thing I really impress upon people in whether it's coaching or workshops that we do is, when you internalize it, then all those impulses you get, your intuitive responses are aligned with that thing that you've internalized, that goal. And the clearer the picture, the stronger those impulses, and all the unconscious stuff that's happening will be geared towards, this is what I want to do, right? And
mm,
it's I think that's such an important piece of, achievement and being successful. When you talk about the really successful athletes, they have really clear goals where they want to get to, whether
mm,
it's a championship or a medal, or being top in their field, or having a certain time or score or whatever, right?
mm,
These are all things to strive for. But you can put those things into your own life, right? I mean, what's the ideal life for you? What's the ideal partner for you? What's the ideal job for you? And
mm,
and then when you can create a clear picture for yourself, that'll help you get there, right? So
mm,
so before you start anything, understand, like you say, why you're doing it and what it's going to look like when it's finished.
mm. And I just realized, I think, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think one of the exercises in the book was to create your own sort of personal mission statement.
Hmm.
And we've been talking about, having your own kind of philosophy for life, or in my work, we do a lot of sort of what's your leadership philosophy, and talking about these things. And I remember when I did that, like my own personal mission statement. That's anything that I've done before, and it was really interesting to create that. So what is most important for me? Creating, looking back to your values, and having that supporting your personal mission statement, and once in a while then referring that, and then it ties really good into, well, obviously all of this ties very well into each other, but being proactive. Okay, so then it's very easy to choose, okay, so what do you want to focus on, what do you want to prioritize in your life, enable to sort of tie into what your purpose is or what it is that you want to achieve in the long run. So
Absolutely.
there's a really good exercise in the book. Maybe we should mention that.
Yeah, to be honest, it's been so long since I read the book, and that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation
Yeah, same
because
here. I'm remembering a lot of things.
so yeah, I think it does bring back a lot of things. I mean, I have the headlines, the habits themselves, but sort of the details beneath them. So anyway, this is as much an exercise for you and I as for our listeners. So that's
For
great.
sure, yeah.
But when you talk about prioritization, that actually segues into the next habit, right? So
Yeah, what's
um,
the? Oh yeah,
so putting first things first.
yeah.
So this is all about prioritization for me, and sorting through, like it they all tie into one another, right? So when you know where you're heading, so when you begin with the end in mind, then you can start to prioritize and talk and think about, okay, I have so many hours in the day. These are the things that I can fit in, and these are the things that are going to lead me to what I want to get to. And the number one thing when people talk about time management is, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time, and it's like as if you can earn more time or buy more time, and none of us can. We all have 24 hours in a day, and I'll ask that stupid question. So how many hours are in your day? Because mine has 24 hours. We all have the same. So you can't have not enough time or too much time. These are phrases people throw out there. Got too much time on my hands. Well, I don't know anyone like that. I certainly am not one of those. But more and more, it's I don't have enough time, and it's not that you don't have enough. It's you're the choices you're making with how you spend your time is it's really the issue. So people talk about we live in a society that's very geared around convenience, and so they don't. People will say, I don't have time to cook a meal myself. I buy this instant, or I get takeout or whatever. So what's more nutritional, right? The instant or the takeout, or something you cook for yourself, and that's a clear choice you're making. And what are you sacrificing? What do your nutrition or your having a home cooked meal, you're sacrificing that for what? So you can watch an hour of Netflix, or and I'm not saying that's what people do. Some people are genuinely that busy that they can't fit everything in. They've got kids, they've got all these different things. But even then, they enroll their kids in so many things, then they no longer have time for fulfilling themselves or making sure they're healthy and at their best to be the best parent they can be. So I think putting first things first is absolutely about this prioritization and understanding what's important to you and what's important to fulfilling the things you want in life.
For sure, yeah. Actually, there's a metaphor in the book that really stuck with me. When he talked about, or he wrote about, imagine if you have a bucket of water, and you have a various amount of rocks or stones, and some are very big and some are very small. And if you want to fill everything in without the water spilling out, how do you begin?
Yeah.
And obviously, if you start with all the small things and you finish up with the very large rocks, the water will spill out. But if you start with the large ones, they can fit in nicely, and then you can sort of tip in all the other stuff. And obviously, what he wants to illustrate is like, well, if you need to begin with the most important, the big blocks. So what's really important to you? What, again, about prioritization? What do you prioritize in life? And it also ties into where we begin. What do you choose to do? Being proactive rather than what do I have to do? So okay, well, I choose to focus on my family. Okay, so I've putting your family first. So it's just building blocks. What is most important? Where do you put most of your time? And if that's in place, if you have your fundament in place, then it's easy to fit in all the other stuff around us. So for me, that's a really helpful way of thinking about it. So in this situation, I might feel really pressured, but what do I need to focus on right now? And also that's also very much about sustainability, to be able to function in the long run. If we only focus on the dust or the sand that feels really important in this moment, but we neglect the big things, that's it's not going to hold up. So just that picture has really stuck with me sometimes when it comes to decision making. Okay, so what do I need to focus on right now?
Hmm. Absolutely.
And yeah, that ties into time management, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a good exercise to ask yourself, what am I filling my life with, right?
Mm.
There's actually a video I watched years ago. It's a university professor. He's with his class, and he fills up a jar, and he's got some rocks in it, like some small rocks,
Mm.
and he fills it up. And he said, "Is this full?" And people kind of nod, and then he puts, I think there's some gravel or something, and then he ends up putting and asking, "Is this full?" And then he puts some sand. Is it full now? Because you're always able to put in more. And then I think at the end he puts water. Like it's been ages since I watched it, but it's a really good metaphor for we think. We think our life is full because we're focusing on certain things, the rocks or the whatever, and then we can fit more in if we if there's lots of if we can prioritize. Like a lot of times those rocks no longer have room because we're filling it with sand or it's with water, and then it overflows or whatever. So anyway, it's the point being is what are we filling our life with, right? And we are you filling it with distractions? Are you watching a lot of TV, doing a lot of shopping, spending too much time at the bar? I don't know, or even things like perfectionists who spend a ton of time trying to get things perfect when 80% would be good, right? And then you can get on to the next thing. And I'm guilty of this sometimes. I look for something and it may not even be that important. I could look for it later, but I get obsessed with it. No, I got to find it now, right? And reminding myself, is this the most important thing I could be doing with my time right now, right? So, and this can happen to all of us. Our attention span, our focus, it gets pulled in so many different directions. And so, what are you filling this moment with, right? I'm a big fan of being present, and probably because my mind takes me to lots of different places. But putting first things first is also about in every moment we can ask ourselves, is this what I want to be doing with this moment? Is am I putting my biggest priorities first? Am I I can be trying to inform myself on something, watching it, and really what I want to be doing is writing, and that's a procrastination thing that we do when we want to avoid something. I still need to learn some more. I need to read some more, rather than getting down to the writing or getting down to just doing the thing, right? So those are all things I think that are important when we're thinking about what's important to us, what's a priority for things we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Should we move on to the next step then?
So so what we've talked about in those first three, and this is I want to segue into this. Stephen Covey talks about the sort of these three levels of I don't want to call it existence, but we are born dependent, right? We're born dependent. We can't survive without our parents, without our support system, our network, and so on. And then we strive for independence, right? So those first three habits are really about independence. He writes in the book. And then he talks about, but what's really important once you have those habits and have yourself in order and you're able to function independently, is looking at interdependence. Because none of us, we live in we thrive through our reliance on each other and our interaction and our helping each other. And cooperation is the reason that our species has risen to the top of the food chain, so to speak. And so the next three habits are really all about that interdependence and remembering that you're not an entity unto yourself. What you do affects other people, and you can benefit from interacting and cooperating with others. So, just wanted to put that in there before we get onto the fourth habit of highly effective people, which is think win-win. And think win-win, I think, is so important. It's kind of talked about a lot, and people say they want a win-win, but they have their own agendas. And what really discourages me, and I just hear more and more people talking in terms of game theory, right? So the life is a zero-sum game. It's I'm going to get what I can for me, because if not, somebody else is going to get it, right? So sort of thing. And are you familiar with the prisoner's dilemma?
Sure.
So the whole two people get caught for a crime, robbing a bank, I think is the example, and they're put in two separate rooms, and basically to summarize it really quickly, if one confesses, or if one says the other person was the mastermind or whatever, then they'll get less of a sentence. Or if both of them are loyal to each other, they actually get the lowest. If one rats out the other, then the one who confesses gets the lesser sentence. Or if they both confess, then they're both screwed, sort of thing. And so this whole game theory of everything is a game where we've got to win. And Simon Sinek talks about this as well. Which game are you playing? And he talks about the infinite game. So you're always trying to improve and grow. It's not like there's a finish line, whereas a lot of people are looking at these short-term, I got to win here, I got to win there, and it's at all costs sort of thing. And I think what Stephen Covey, obviously wrote this book years and years ago, was really pointing to that. It's when we help others, it'll come back to us. When we look to not to always get our best interests met, but also make sure that the other person that we're interacting with also has a benefit. When we look at things in terms of our interdependence, rather than I'm going to get mine, and you have to sort yourself out. I think this is such an important notion within our relationships, within our work environments, within our communities, within society as a whole. If we're constantly making other people the bad guy and we're the good guy, or we're like, well, I deserve it more than them, or this fear that that's behind greed, or it doesn't even need to be greed. It's this sense of fear that I don't have enough. I think if we can get away from that and look to how can we make sure that it's a win-win for everybody, I think the world would be a better place. So yeah, think win-win. Yeah. Habit number 4.
No, I agree. I mean, I think win-win has kind of become a little bit of a it's just a jargon kind of word that you throw out there. And nobody really believes when you say win-win. But when you're talking about sustainability and cooperation and collaboration and being successful in the long run, community service, all of these kind of things, it all ties into this. And of course, it's important to talk about interdependence. If you want to be successful with your business and your clients are unhappy with you, or your partners are unhappy with you, it's not gonna work, right? So you really need to think in a way that is, well, it's about systemic thinking. Like, so how do you connect with the other parts of your systems, and making sure that you're adding value to the system, and not only for yourself. You need to have a bigger kind of holistic view on things than only your own little part. And I've had a really strong notion about this, maybe becoming a little bit older, but thinking about the importance of community service. I've been working with 360 that I've talked about before, and in this 360, it's one part about sort of communal. I forgot what it's called, but it's in the creative part being about supporting the community or benefiting for the wider good. And in the beginning, I didn't understand that. Why is this important in leadership? If you want to be a leader for others, what does this have to do with anything? But more and more, I see the value of it, not only because for the actual community service, but also being an inspiration or role model to others. That we need to focus not only on our own little piece of cake. We need to focus on bigger parts. And there's so much work that can be done. There's so much opportunities in kind of voluntarily work or supporting your any kind of local football club or soccer club or whatever you're doing, but wherever you can, how can you be of service? And I think that's a really nice way of thinking, just being part of a society. You have a really important play there, apart from being your professional self or your family self. How do you fit into the community?
Yeah. And I think not asking the question right away, what's in it for me?
Mm.
Or what am I going to get out of it? Because there's hidden benefit in all these kind of things. When I think about, we could ask ourselves, why do we do this podcast? I mean, we don't get paid for it. It actually costs money, and it costs us time, and so we're not selling anything. So what's the benefit? Well, for one, I'm hoping our listeners get a lot of benefit out of it, and I know they do, because I've had people comment back to me, and where they've enjoyed a particular episode or whatever. But you and I benefit from this, just because just having these conversations and keeping the ideas fresh, and and just being able to remind each other of stuff or bring things back to the forefront. So I think that this is a win-win, right? So I think when you always approach things in terms of I got to get something out of it, well, you're always going to get something out of it. Experience in itself will deliver something. Certainly, it makes sense to prioritize. We already talked about in the first habits, but I think really recognizing that when you give, you always will get something back.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right, so that's think win-win, and now we get to habit number 5, which is I don't know if I could say it's because they're all important, but it's the one that I maybe refer to the most, because it has a lot to do with communication, right? So the habit number 5 is seek first to understand and then to be understood, and I think this is such a key element of good communication. We are often trying to make our point or trying to get our opinion out there, and we often fail miserably at listening. In all of our trying to make our point, we're not trying to understand the other. There's no empathy or compassion. There's no, it's just all about being able to express what we have to express, and then our own triggers, our own assumptions, our own filter of beliefs that we have will affect all of that, instead of just trying to put all that aside and first listen and understand someone else. And I think it's a fundamental piece of it's so fundamental to good communication, and yet so often we forget about it.
For sure. I think it's one of these things that we talk about so much, and it sounds so easy, but it's so difficult to do, actually, right? But I agree, it's so fundamental to, if we want to be successful in communication. So, okay, so where do you start? And it's always a great reminder to just get back to, okay, so listen first, and then listen, understand, and then you can share whatever it is that we want to share. But it doesn't seem to be the sort of common way to communicate. It's always, I mean, for most people, I think we start with ourselves and what do I think, what do I need, etc. But really, to if you're in a serious situation, I love that when I'm in a coaching conversation, because then I force myself really to understand the other person first, and then to, it's not about me. And when you force yourself into that situation, it's such a nice feeling that, oh, now I'm practicing this.
Yeah. Stephen Covey has a nice story in the book where, well, it's not a nice story, but he has a story of, a guy on a subway, and
Oh yeah,
he's
sorry.
observing a guy with his kids, and they're totally, they're totally misbehaving. They're all over the place, and
Mm.
he's just sitting there, kind of not doing anything about it. And then the guy goes over and makes a comment or says something, and he says, "Well, I'm really sorry, but if I remember correctly, I think his wife has just died, or she's in the
Yeah. Mm.
hospital, but
Yeah, she just passed away. Yeah.
yeah, she just passed away, and I'm really and the kids are, they've got all this pent up emotion and so on. So, and then all of a sudden the perspective changes, right?
Mm.
And so I think this is the important thing, that we're always going at things from our perspective. Obviously, we can only see the world from our vantage point,
Mm.
and so that's why it's even more important to try and first, question, am I seeing things correctly, right? And how can you do that without first trying to see how other people are seeing it, and
Mm.
how other people are interpreting or observing, and you can disagree or whatever, but at least then you understand where someone else is coming from, or what their experience is, or what they're feeling. It's a big component of nonviolent communication. Marshall Rosenberg. So
Mm.
so so I think, really getting into this habit of trying, before you try and make your point or make your demands, or get your point of view across, really to try and understand how someone else, because our response is often, especially if it's emotional,
Mm.
how could you, or how, instead of, it's easier for us because as coaches, well, not always, because when it's personal, then you get out of the coaching
For
mode.
you, that's different.
But as coaches, we ask questions, right? And that's the best way to start in trying to understand the other person, as long as you're not having leading questions, or asking, like a police investigator or whatever. You've got a theory and trying to lead there. Being really open, as I think, is important, and really having an earnest desire to really understand that other person, I think, is
Mm.
an important component of that.
Mm. Yeah, and tying that into what we just talked about, when to be able to have a win-win. Well, I mean, it's if you don't understand what the other part actually wants or is trying to communicate to you, how can you create a win-win? So it's really fundamental to be able to achieve that as well. And I've just realized, I remember I was listening to some kind of webinar in coaching about just always having in mind, so what is the client in this case, what is the client saying that he or she needs help with? What is he or she trying to communicate, trying to say, to really focus to understand how can I be of support to you, and to take perspectives into account to that. And just having that in mind, I mean, it's really using your, of course, tying into your emotional intelligence, and really your empathy as well, to really put yourself not necessarily in that person's shoes, but really to understand what is he or she or the other part wanting. What do they want support with, or what do they need help with, or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have these things that we think are solutions. It drives me nuts when the type of psychologist that just makes, they're just looking to make a diagnosis, right? They're trying to
Mm.
put someone in a box and then give them here's the solution for you. Or imagine a doctor where you don't really listen to you get the first couple of bits of information, you jump to a conclusion, and then and then off you go, right? And fair enough. Some doctors, they don't have enough. They're not allowed, or they don't have, because of the way the system's set up, they can't give anybody more than 2 or 3 minutes of their time. But but that doesn't mean we have to live that way, right? So I think it's but when you think about examples of where not listening well or not trying to understand properly can lead us, right? I mean, misunderstandings can lead to all kinds of conflicts because we've jumped to conclusions. We didn't try to first understand someone, and then it escalated into something much worse than it needed to be. So, so it's one that gets the most airtime for me in terms of the 7 habits. I talk about it the most, or at least I refer to it the most.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the final one in terms of interdependence and is a concept that Stephen Covey talks about as synergize. And this is all about, this is something that's very relevant for organizations, for businesses, but for sports teams, but even for people in their individual lives, in family units or in communities. Synergize is about building on the strengths of the people around you. And recognizing that together you can be more effective, be stronger, be more efficient, right? And so letting other people, contribute their strengths, and synergizing. What do I do well? What do you do well? Bring that together to get I heard an example of you've got this apple tree and there's 2 guys and they're too short to pick the apples, but if one gets on the other guy's shoulders, he can pick the apples. It's about combining your strengths to get the best response or to get the best outcome. So that's what synergizing is all about. And in order to do that, you really need to understand what your own strengths are, right? Yeah. And also appreciate the strengths of others. So obviously super relevant in the workplace, but I think it can be applied in all areas of life.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in every aspect. I realized I probably talked a lot about this when we talked about step 4, thinking win-win, but it really ties together for me. Again, having this overview and the holistic view of how do parts interact with each other, and how can we, as you're saying, how can you utilize the strengths or the benefits of each part to make a greater good of all the parts that we have. So tying in that with systemic thinking and to be able to utilize the advantages or the strengths of each part in the system. But then we need to take a step back and look at the overview of what we're having. So it's really about raising the view a little bit to be able to synergize.
Yeah, exactly. It does take some awareness and being able to. I mean, this is for a manager. This is a super important skill, right? Understanding the strengths. We look for the deficits, the weaknesses, and the problems, but we often don't. We sometimes overlook the strengths of people and how they can help us. And some people are afraid to ask for help, or some managers feel like they have to have all the answers, right? They can't be at a disadvantage, and that's. When you manage a team, it's using all of those expertise. You just have to be able to have the overview. You don't have to be an expert in any one thing. And the same goes within partnerships. I mean, we have in these typical gender roles that we sometimes have, where the man's supposed to do this and but maybe the woman might be better suited, or whatever the situation might be. But really being able to be aware of what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and look, just having done a renovation and a move here, look, I'm not a great. In German they say Handwerker. I'm not a handyman. I can get by with a few things, but and I could probably learn it, but I don't have the patience. I get quickly frustrated. So it's not that I have a fixed mindset on it. I know I could learn some of these things. I just don't have the desire, and putting first things first, habit number 3.
Mm.
I have other things that I know I can add more value with. There are other things that I know it's better to use my time on. And so that I hired somebody to paint the house, and I hired somebody to do, because look, at the end of the day, I'll probably have to get someone to fix the mistakes anyway. And the amount of time I would need to invest to get good at it, which would be fine if I really enjoyed doing it. And I don't. I enjoy other things. So recognizing your own weaknesses, but also your strengths, and whatever you feel like your weaknesses are, understanding where that other person can really, where those synergies are, where coming together can make you both better than you are.
Yeah. And one thing that I really appreciate with certain individuals it's not. I just find that there's a certain individuals that have this ability to really connect the dots and connect people with each other. I think in Gallup you talk about the connectors, actually, where people are able to really connect people with people that would be a really good fit. So especially if you have a large organization or just in your network, so like you should talk to that person because you would have a lot of synergies, or you could do wonderful things together. Just having that ability to connect with people with each other doesn't mean that this individual has to be a part of it, but just being a connector in that sense to be able to create things. I think that's a really good ability that I would like to practice a bit more as well, actually.
And I think for us, we experience it whenever we do workshops together, or with any other trainers, and it really affects the outcome when you can synergize with the person you're delivering, the other person who's facilitating a workshop, and being able to deliver with them, and just recognizing, this is what I do well, so here's what I'm going to contribute, and here's what that person does well, and so I'm going to leave room for that. And I think that all of that it can happen in so many different parts of your life when you recognize your strengths and the strengths of others, and you put those together and synergize them. It's fantastic. I think of the example of the orchestra, right? Everybody's playing a different instrument, but when everybody synergizes, you really get beautiful music. So cool.
That's a good metaphor.
So the final habit is, so we've gone through things about independence, how to work on yourself, interdependence, how to make the most of interaction with other people. And then, the final one is, he calls it sharpening the saw, right? And I think he even uses the story of, somebody trying to cut wood with or cut down a tree or saw down a tree or something with a blunt saw. So it's not cutting very well. And then somebody comes along and says, maybe you should sharpen your saw. I don't have time, right? But with a sharp saw, you get it done in no time. So really, but sharpening the saw is really about keeping yourself practiced, and keeping your skills and practicing these habits and putting them in place. And I think in the book, I know in the book he talks about whenever you learn something new, teach it to someone else, because it'll further anchor it in yourself. I'm pretty sure that he either he said it in one of his talks or he wrote it in his book. But that's a great way. So when you learn something, so if you've heard these habits for the first time, explain them to someone else, and it'll anchor it further in you. So there's teaching it to others. There's practicing it on a daily basis. There's reflecting, and being self-aware. All of these things are great tools to sharpen your saw and your skills and your ability to function at your best. And for me, my coaching slogan is, the tagline I have on my website is, your guide to the best you, because it's really about helping. My intention as a coach is to help people find their own highest potential, or get them on their way there. And I think sharpening the saw is all about that. Those daily practices that we have, in order to integrate these habits and to be the best version of ourselves.
Yeah, I connect this a lot with well, a few things. First of all, setting kind of learning goals for yourself or development goals for yourself. That's something that I really enjoy doing. Okay, so this say that I want to learn this, or I want to this semester I want to learn this and this, but just always be curious to learn new things. But then also, of course, when we're talking about incorporating these habits into your daily lives in a better way, for me, and I said this many times before, it's about intention setting. So, okay, what if there's one thing that I can practice today? What's that going to be? You know, like, and having that intention. Oh, when I go into this meeting, I'm really going to focus on to be understanding the counterpart first, and then to be understood, and just having that intention going into the meeting. I just believe that it's helpful, because you can't practice everything at once, or maybe you can, but for me it's more helpful if, okay, now I'm going to focus on this part and then on this part, but just bring it into the intention span or into the attention span, and sharpening the saw in that way.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you need to internalize it, a habit first, make sure it's automated, and then you can move on to developing the other thing. I think another thing that is really helpful, and I think any really successful people you talk to will have some kind of a morning routine, or they'll have different routines. And I think morning routines are really good, but you can have routines throughout the day, and BJ Fogg talks about this in his Tiny Habits, but it's the way you can change different or develop habits is by connecting them with other activities you already do. He talked about it in terms of, when I have to use the washroom, I will do some push-ups, right?
Yeah.
So he connected those two, and then, he started with 2 push-ups, 5, 10, and pretty soon, every time, he was doing 100 push-ups a day. So that's one piece of it. But I think when you create rituals, or when you create routines for yourself, in the morning, I like to meditate, do yoga. I have a list of different things that I like to do. My life's been a little bit of chaos, so I've gotten out of some of my routines, and one of my big intentions for this year is to make sure I get those back up and running. But I have a list of things because sometimes I'm up at 5 a.m, and sometimes depending on the time zone I'm in, or the place that I am because of the travel that we do. But I have a list of things, and I make sure that there's some time set aside in the morning, to meditate, to do those things that will get me mentally prepared for the day and physically prepared. Some people, their morning ritual consists of drinking coffee and reading the news. And is that the best habit for you to start your day? There's
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it may be. It's not the right one for me, but there's a really good podcast Andrew Huberman does. He's a professor at
the Huberman Lab, or something.
Yeah, the Huberman Lab. Yeah, he has so many great hacks, as you say. But he really, and his intention is just to zero cost education of people, and he's really you talk about the win-win there. I'm sure he has a benefit, but he's all about giving, which I love, and really good scientific information. But he has these things that you can do throughout your day, or in the morning if you want to get better sleep, or if you want to improve your focus, or your mental acuity, or your health. He's just got a ton of these different things, and so these are all things you again make first things first. But as we say in habit 3, but really in terms of the things that you're trying to achieve, what are the most important things that you need to integrate right now, and how can you make them rituals in your day? So we've got some morning rituals. There are, like, throughout the day rituals you can have. Some people on their lunch break, they'll go for a walk, or they'll, or people will set focus time every day, or a couple of times a week, in order to actually reflect or to reassess, or some creative time. And then there's evening rituals. The one I really like is, some people write a gratitude journal, but, just reflecting on the things you're grateful for, I think is really good for your mental health, really gives you a positive outlook. Sometimes evening meditation is a better meditation. Look, I'm a big meditation believer and fan, but there are all kinds of rituals you can have. Some people, reading a book to shut down the thoughts of all the busyness of the day is a really good ritual. So finding the rituals throughout your day in order to practice some of these things are really helpful. And sometimes there's also a ritual that I'm going way back now and I'm trying to remember where I read it, but just sort of doing a revision of the day, right? And then reflecting on what was good and what you'd like to change, and then revisualizing that day completely successful, right? So that you're practicing in your mind, doing all the habits the way you wanted to do them, even though you didn't do them that way. And then again, it's a refresher for your mind. So that can be an evening ritual. So yeah, there's tons of great things out there, and everybody needs to figure out what the right one is for them. But I think finding ways to practice these habits or any other habits that you find are beneficial is super important. Sharpen the saw.
Yeah, just having fun with it. I think just experimenting and see what works for you. I think that's really to have some fun. It doesn't have to be super strict with everything all the time, but just that's really important way to sharpen the saw. To have fun with it, experiment, try what works for you.
Absolutely. The same as what works for kids, play, curiosity, right? These are the things that Mihai Csikszentmihalyi talks about, getting into the flow state, Make sure you challenge yourself, but it's got to be fun, make it playful, and, set goals for yourself, measure it somehow. And I think if you can do it that way rather than making it a chore, I think that's great. And then automating it so it just happens automatically, like brushing your teeth is a ritual we do mornings and evenings, most of us. And so you can, if you can tie it into brushing your teeth, those are ways to trigger new habits. So I think those are our 7 habits.
And that's about my time, because I really need to run off to another thing right now.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks for running through those with me, Toby. It was a good refresher for both of us. You definitely reminded me of some things that I'd forgotten. So
yes, likewise. Yeah.
I hope that's been beneficial for everyone listening. It's a great way to start off the new year. If you haven't read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People from Stephen Covey, I highly recommend it. And until next time, Toby, you're up for our next topic. And
that's something good.
Thanks for joining us. We're looking forward to another great year of conversations and hoping to help people along their way of personal development. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.
Thanks. Bye.